My ex may have planted a camera in my home to monitor me and our son. Here's what I discovered. I, 24F, met my ex, 27M, 7 years ago, and we dated for about a year before I found out I was pregnant. He is a Jehovah's Witness, and though I was raised in the religion, I was never baptized, thankfully. When I got pregnant, I was pressured to marry him to remain in good standing with the Kingdom Hall Church. Despite my parents urging me to take my time and think it through, I ignored their advice. At 18 and deeply influenced by the teachings, I believed he was the best thing that had ever happened to me. Being a Jehovah's Witness, I thought he couldn't possibly do any wrong. How wrong I was. While I was pregnant, he subjected me to emotional and physical abuse. The stress and trauma led to my son being born prematurely, and I spiraled into postpartum depression. By the time my son was 8 months old, I realized I had to prioritize his well-being over my feelings for his father. I made the difficult decision to leave both my ex and the religion. I still don't know how I found the strength, but I credit my son for giving me the love and courage to move forward. Fast forward 5 years, and life is so much better. I have a great career, a reliable car, and a home I share with my son. We have everything we need, and I've recently started a new relationship with an amazing person. Life is finally on the right track. My ex and I actually have a pretty cordial co-parenting relationship. He seems to have matured a lot and is now in a relationship. I get along great with his GF and my son likes her. He recently decided to move 2 doors next to my place. I didn't really mind this as we don't fight or hate each other. I actually saw this as a good thing since he will be closer to our son and can be more involved in school. Last week I walked into my apartment and someone had broken in. But they didn't take anything at all. A few stuff were moved around. Seemed like they were looking for something and gave up. The first thing that popped in my head was my son's father. I have been living here for years and never had any issues. I actually live in front of the police station, so unless you go in through the back they would see everything. I filed a police report and left it at that. This is where things start to feel strange, and my suspicions seem to be proving correct. 3 days ago, I dropped my son off at my ex's house. He brought up that I shouldn't let our son play with certain toys because they're violent action figures, like Power Rangers. The thing is, he shouldn't have known about those toys. Out of respect for his beliefs as a Jehovah's Witness, I ensure our son doesn't bring those toys to his house. When I asked him how he knew about them, he went pale and stumbled over his words before saying that our son must have told him. Sure, it's possible my son mentioned it, but I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. Then, 2 days ago, I dropped my son off in the morning, and my ex commented that I need to shower him every night because I didn't do so last night. There's no way my son could have told him this. It was the very next morning, and they hadn't even spoken. For context, I usually bathe my son every day, but the night before, we had gotten home late from swim class, and I figured it would be okay to skip. It's one of those rare, tired parent moments we all have. Still, how could my ex have known? Am I just being paranoid? I hate this unsettling feeling like my privacy is being invaded in my own home. Should I confront him about it? Is there a way for me to confirm my suspicions? I've tried looking around my house for anything suspicious, but I haven't found anything obvious that suggests a camera. TLDR, my house was broken into 2 weeks after my ex moved in next door, and I'm starting to suspect he may have planted a camera in my home to monitor how I live with my son. Relevant comments. OOP added tease in the comments as a reply to a commenter. I did not know he was moving in 2 doors down. He told me when he signed the lease, and at that point I tried to look at the bright side of things. I now see that there is no bright side in the situation. I hate the feeling of walking out my door and knowing he can see what time I am home and what time I get back by just seeing if my car is in my driveway. I agree that the religion he is teaching my son is not good in any way. But there's not much the law will do besides give me full rights to his medical decisions, which I have. When he is with his dad he goes to his church, but when he is with me he knows we don't do any of that stuff. Once my son is at a certain age he will be able to make the right decision, and I will always steer him the right way. Make him ask questions and to do his research first, then come to a conclusion. We have shared custody, but I make the decisions on medical. I tried taking custody, but unfortunately I lost the case. The abuse is documented. I lifted the restraining order after 2 years that we divorced. We would do pick up and drop off at the police station, and after 2 years I had to take the next step in trusting that the past was just that. I did not want my son asking me why he gets dropped off at a police station parking lot. I have seen a therapist, mainly to address the grip the religion had on me. I was also dealing with postpartum depression, so we covered a lot during those sessions. Honestly, I don't think I've ever fully recovered. It got so bad that my mind actually blocked out many memories from those years, a psychological response my therapist had warned me about. While it's good that I can't recall certain traumatic events, it also leaves me vulnerable, as it has in this situation. Certain triggers, like specific songs or revisiting that town, can bring it all flooding back. I should also mention that my son's father has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Given everything, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a camera in my apartment. I'm collecting all the advice from this thread and planning how to investigate without drawing attention to myself. Commenter. I'm a former JW too. Do you think it's possible your ex is trying to find out if you're sleeping with your boyfriend, so he can claim to be biblically free to remarry? Oop. We're already divorced. The elders advised him not to sign the papers because it would mean he couldn't remarry. I took it to court, and after presenting all my police reports and evidence of the abuse, the court finalized the divorce. That said, I see your point. Since he technically isn't free to remarry on his end, this could explain his behavior. Either way, he's out of luck. I don't let my boyfriend stay over. I always go to his place when my son is with his father. Especially now, with my ex living so close, it's just too strange. Update. I have been lurking in the sub for the past week and I am so happy I found this. I really wish I would have known about this years ago when I left the congregation. It would have made the pain less and the loneliness not as bad. When I left the organization I had no friends and no encouragement that I almost convinced myself multiple times to go back, but I was able to get through it. I wanted to share my story with you, but before I'll give a little background on my past. I pretty much grew up as a witness and I never got baptized. I met my son's father when I was about 18 and I ended up pregnant a couple months after that. The elders pretty much forced marriage on me. As soon as we moved in together he was abusive. It was horrible. He would physically abuse me knowing I was pregnant with his son. It got so bad that I would literally urinate myself because of how scared I was of him. The last time he laid his hands on me was when I was 6.5 months pregnant. I remember he barged into the bathroom since he knew I was calling the cops, and when he opened the door he hit my belly and I went straight into the tub. They had to perform an emergency C-section. When I was under anesthesia he even signed a paper stating I would be refusing blood transfusion, and since he was my husband it was his decision to make. Thankfully I had great doctors and my son and I were healthy and made it through. I remember the elders coming to visit me when I was still in the hospital. I remember them telling me that I needed to work harder in putting Jehovah first in our marriage because without him our marriage would fail. A few months later I left him and I left the organization. I went to therapy for my postpartum depression and I was able to physiologically block those memories even though sometimes certain things trigger it and it all comes back. It's insane how the mind works. I have a great relationship with my parents. They never shun me and they always look after my son and I. I know they are brainwashed, but I know deep down my father knows I made the right decision. And after all this mess I think he's opening his eyes a little. The link below is my first post and then below I copied and pasted my update. I don't know why they locked my post. I was at work and when I checked it was automatically locked. I did receive some good advice on there, but it's different when it comes from people who know what you grew up in and know just how much mind control plays a big role on everything when it comes to JW. I also would like some advice on how to handle these elders. They keep calling my parents and begging them to reason with me. I am assuming this is really going to reflect them in a bad light and we all know how much they hate that. Also please keep in mind that my parents, although witnesses, have my best interest in mind. My father sat me down and told me no matter what he will stand by my decision and he will fully support me going through with these charges. I just wish that they didn't have to receive all this harassment. Update. First, I want to thank everyone for your suggestions and messages. The past week has been overwhelming and my life feels completely turned upside down. I'll try to explain everything that's happened without making this too lengthy. Last Wednesday, after reading all the comments, I decided to buy a spy detector on Amazon to put my mind at ease and finally feel secure in my home. I opted for 2-day delivery and planned how to use it discreetly. To avoid suspicion, I arranged to meet my son's father to discuss a new schedule. Friday, we met for ice cream with our son. Meanwhile, I gave my boyfriend a spare key and asked him to use the spy detector in my apartment while I was out. Our meeting lasted about 40 minutes, and then I received the all-clear text from my boyfriend, so I wrapped things up. After leaving, I called my boyfriend, and he told me to drop my son off at my mom's and head straight home. When I arrived, he met me in my car and broke the news. The detector picked up something suspicious. It flagged signals in my son's room near the doorknob and along one side of a wall where nothing was hanging. I didn't know if it was a malfunction or something real, but the possibility was enough for me to call the police. Even if it sounded silly, I had to prioritize my son's safety. When the officers arrived, I explained the situation. One of them, who I see every morning at my son's school, was very understanding. He called in a tech specialist since they didn't have the necessary equipment on hand. At this point, I hadn't mentioned my suspicion about my son's father, wanting to wait for confirmation before implicating him. About 10 minutes later, my son's dad unexpectedly walked up the driveway and asked if everything was okay. I said yes, but the officer quickly intervened, noticing my discomfort. He told him only residents were allowed on the property. My ex then explained he was our son's father and had recently moved 2 houses down. The officer firmly asked him to leave. Once my ex left, the officer asked more questions about him, and I shared everything in detail. After hearing my account, the officer said there was a high likelihood that a camera had been placed in my son's room. Once the tech arrived, he scanned the room, and at this point we were told to still wait outside. About 30 minutes later, he asks me to come in and for my BF to stay behind. He proceeds to tell me that there was a camera in my son's room. They found a tiny camera in the doorknob. Not sure if you are familiar with this, but my doorknobs lock from the inside, but on the opposite side there is a little hole where you usually need a flathead screwdriver or a similar looking key to open it. I will take a picture later on to show. He explained to me whoever put in this camera replaced the doorknobs with 2 of the same knobs, meaning that the door no longer has a lock. I never realized this. It was such a small detail that I never realized. I never lock my son's room, so this was not something I would look into. I broke down. I didn't know what to say or what to think. He told me that it was linking through Bluetooth/Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, the camera signal was cut and he was working on getting some code to see where the signal was coming from. Once they confirmed this, I was given the address, and of course it ended up coming from my ex's address. Not the exact address, but more coordination points. No idea what they refer it to, they just told me it's a system they use to track a signal. I was in complete shock. I think part of me thought he would never do this. He would never violate my privacy and our son's privacy by doing this. I thought we were past this stage. After they broke the news to me, they told me I can press charges if I would like. If this is what I decided to do, they would have to process a warrant for his arrest. It was the hardest decision I had to make, but I told them yes. They explained to me that the best thing for me to do was to stay at a relative's or friend's house until this was resolved, as it can be dangerous for me to be so close to him. I don't understand why they couldn't take him then and there, but I told them I would pack a bag. I decided to stay at my parents' home. It was near my job and it was a place my son was comfortable staying in. I did not hear from my ex at all Saturday. I know I mentioned in my previous post that my parents/ex are Jehovah's Witness, which plays a big part in this whole story. Sunday night my parents had plans and I stayed behind with my son. I hear a knock on the door. I look, and to my surprise it is 2 elders. I guess you can call them pastors to those not familiar with the terms. These were the same men that would tell me not to call the cops when my ex would get physical. These are also the same men that watched me grow up since I was 3. I decided to open the door and they asked to come in. My brother was in the other room, so I felt a little more at ease speaking with them. As soon as they start taking the Bible out, I tell them I do not feel comfortable with that, and if they have anything to say it will be through a conversation and not through the Bible. They agreed and started explaining to me the consequences my ex is facing in the Kingdom Hall for what he has done. They also told me that my ex was taken down to the station Sunday morning, but that he confessed to them everything on Saturday. To make it short, they begged me to drop the charges and kept telling me to think about my son. To think about how he would feel knowing his dad is facing these charges. They kept saying over and over that Jehovah does not condemn his behavior and sometimes the organization can work this out within themselves. I told them I would not drop the charges. What he did was violate my privacy and that I was happy that they would work it out between their religion, but I would work out my end through the law. They proceeded to tell me that they have lawyers that can back up my ex and that if this is the route I take I should make sure I am covered as well. They also said the reason he put a camera is because he wants custody of my son, because it's not fair to him to not have eternal life and my ex can save my son. Crazy, right? I don't know what he was trying to find by putting a camera in my son's room, because I have absolutely nothing to hide and my son is very well taken care of. I asked them to leave and they did. When I told my dad about what happened and what they were saying to me, he called one of the elders and pretty much went off on him. I hope it doesn't ruin his rep, since I know this religion means the world to him, but at the same time I also hope maybe this will open his eyes. This entire situation feels like a nightmare, and I'm at a loss for what to do. Deep down, I don't want to press charges because he is my son's father. I worry about how this might affect his record or how my son might feel when he grows up and learns that I was the one who sent his dad to jail over this. On the other hand, I feel strongly that he needs to understand the gravity of his actions. Violating someone's privacy, regardless of religious justification, is unacceptable. As of now, I haven't made a final decision. I've learned that he's out on bail and has a court date coming up, which I'll need to attend. At that time, I'll have the option to drop the charges if I choose to. Adding to the stress, I've also received a notice from family court. he's filing for full custody of our son. Apparently, he submitted this filing about a month ago, meaning this was something he had been planning for a while. This realization is another reason I feel hesitant to drop the charges. It could be beneficial for my case in family court. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. I've found a new place to live, and thankfully, my landlord has agreed to let me break my lease. Moving is heartbreaking. I love my current apartment, but I have no choice. The new place is smaller and more expensive, but it feels like the safest option for my son and me right now. Relevant comments. Analytiker. Do not drop any charges. My reasoning. Besides all the religious BS, your ex is not rational and is already physically abusive. This is a bad combo. It has been my experience that he will never get better without therapy and/or medication, and most likely issues will arise where he won't do or continue treatment even if he started. What are the charges against your ex? Has the DA's office stopped any further investigation? Have you had an opportunity to speak with the investigators in your case? Have they hinted that they have other concerns about him? Law enforcement can be very effective in unearthing things through intimidation. They, however, will not want to be jerked around and expend the effort if they sense you won't follow through. They may intimidate you a little to test your resolve. Hold fast to what you decide. All the data he was gathering about you to perhaps further his custody case has been made null and void and is inadmissible because it was garnered from a criminal act and will not be allowed to be presented. His illegal actions will also be used against him. All that goes away if you don't press charges. If you have not contacted a local agency concerning spousal abuse, regardless of marriage status, they will help you or direct you to help. They have experience in this and will guide you to the best course of action as well as provide support. Concerning the elders that visited. Regardless of what we think about the org, that wasn't protocol, and if you want that bullshit to stop dead in its tracks, contact or have someone contact a sharp elder from another congregation, etc. if you want that. These things that are happening to you are not unique to the org. They happen everywhere, a lot. Because of that, there are many resources. Please make use of them. I hope you remain safe and everything works out for the best for you. OOP. I went to court today to file for a restraining order, and they issued a temporary one until the court date when the judge will decide whether to make it permanent. I also visited the police station to get more information on the case. They couldn't give me much detail, but they told me that even if I drop the charges, the state will still press them. Apparently, they take these kinds of incidents very seriously, especially because it happened in a child's room. They mentioned that someone would reach out to me, but advised me to get a lawyer, as it's not recommended to handle this alone. There are many legal aspects I wouldn't fully understand without professional help. When I asked about the evidence, they confirmed they have it in municipal custody and can't release it to anyone. I've started looking into lawyers and have scheduled a few consultations for tomorrow. My custody hearing is at the end of November, so I'm hoping the court date for the camera incident will be before that, so I can present it as additional evidence showing he's unfit for custody. With the charges pending and him out on bail, I believe it'll be enough for the judge to rule in my favor for full custody. Right now, we have shared custody, but after everything that's happened, I'm seeking full custody. Friday Fern. Wow, go your dad. IMO, your ex is a psychopath and should be locked up immediately. You have a fantastic BF and a good cop. Now listen to these people and get a good lawyer. It looks like the dominoes are all set up to fall upon this creep. OOP. I am definitely lawyering up and will keep all charges. The state is also pressing charges, so by the looks of it he is in deep trouble, which is why the elders are acting the way they are. After the whole child abuse stuff going on, I am sure they don't want an article stating how a JW had a camera installed in his son's bedroom. I also forgot to mention that one of the elders is actually my ex's uncle. Which could be another reason for the constant pressure to drop the charges. Old movie fan. This behavior from the elders seems really odd, almost like they have a personal interest in getting the charges dropped. Why would that be? If your ex is seeking full custody, he likely reached out to the elders for support. Perhaps they even suggested he install a spy camera, or they know someone with the expertise to do it. If the charges aren't dropped, the truth might come to light. By the way, the organization has a guide for JWs involved in custody disputes. If the elders are contacting your parents, they should ask if your ex has admitted to breaking in and installing the camera, and whether anyone else was involved. When the elders told you they would handle it within the congregation, did they explain what actions they would take? Do not drop any charges, especially for your son's sake. OOP. One of the elders is actually my ex's uncle, which creates a clear conflict of interest. He was part of the committee when I was pregnant and had my privileges as an unbaptized publisher taken away. Sorry, I'm not familiar with all the English terms since I attended a Spanish congregation. It feels so strange how aggressively they are pushing my family. It almost seems like they're trying to hide something. They told me they're still following their process, but it could lead to him being reprimanded. I'm not sure of the exact term, but it seems like he won't be shunned, just given a slap on the wrist and marked as bad association.